This is my lab, and I test for different various components in the lab, like pH, titratable acidity, SO2 content. I do blending here. I do any sort of fining trials in here. I can test for heat and cold stability, and basically all sort of analyses. And tasting happens in this room as well, because there's a basin to spit into, which is the sink. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do. We measure out additions, and this smells like a bakery during harvest because of all the yeast that gets rehydrated in this room. I select for certain characteristics for the yeast depending on what product I'm going to finish up with. So if I'm making a Riesling, I want to hold on to the aromatics, and I'm going to ferment cold. Not all yeasts are amicable to that sort of environment. Most yeast want to be at something like 70 degrees or 80 degrees. That's where they're happiest. And we ferment Rieslings more like 55 or 60 to try and hang on to as much aroma as we can, fruit character. And so that environment, we have to select for certain yeast strains. Also, certain yeast strains require different nutrients, and not different nutrients, different amounts of nutrients. So certain yeast strains can put off aromas into the wine if they don't have the nutrients that they need. And that could be nitrogen source, or it could be micronutrients, vitamins, basically. So all of those things go into when I go through and pick a yeast. And then also it's historical knowledge of using that particular strain to make a particular product that we have. So if we like D47 or D46 for Chardonnay production, we're going to use it again next year because we liked how it tasted when we finished the wine last year. And it makes me very grumpy when they stop making yeast strains. This is a refractometer, and it's used for testing sugar and juice. It's no longer accurate once there's alcohol in it, so I just use it for juice testing. You put a dot of juice in the eye, and it will measure how much it is based on reflection. So that's a refractometer. Let's see. Clinitest, commonly used for urine testing for sugar. I use it to see how much sugar is left in a wine after it's done fermenting. And I can dilute it to get it in range. It only tests up to 1% sugar. So they're actually starting to not use this as much for testing, and so I have to go on the internet to find it. It's kind of an odd thing. It's sort of going out of style for medical reasons, but the wine industry uses them quite a lot for testing. And it's just a quick sort of analysis. It's not 100% accurate, but it's enough for me to know. When I started looking at Cornell, I wanted to talk with them about the winemaking degree, enology, and at the time there were no faculty hired yet. So I was basically a curriculum guinea pig, and I sort of custom made my degree, and that's why my degree isn't in enology, because it didn't exist yet at Cornell. I just sort of tried everything that they had scheduled for the curriculum except for those enology classes, which turned out fine in terms of my education is much broader. I could go into cheese making, I could go into beer making, I could go into yogurt making. That was part of what we learned at Cornell. Cornell historically is a very dairy-oriented ag school, and so all of those things translate very nicely into wine. Wine is actually a more forgiving product than dairy because of the pH level, because of the alcohol. There's a lot less stringent protocols. Dairy is one of the most highly regulated food processing systems in our nation. So it's a little bit different than winemaking in terms of you have to be very strict about everything that you do in dairy. And like I said, wine's a little bit more forgiving in that way. So it was a good basis for me to go into wine from that sort of basis. I don't know. Yeah. I think I did want to go into wine though, because I was out on the wine trail with my parents and got to see that this was a good local industry to be in. The tourism was just growing and growing and growing. There were new wineries popping up all the time. So, yeah.